Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Jones with McGraw-Hill. All right, as you heard, I'm a refugee from the design side of the world. I took the .com plunge back in '99, and I went with some friends over to Primavera Systems and helped them do some web stuff and really got the bug for technology in our industry. Came with McGraw-Hill 6 years ago now and have been part of our digital transformation, taking all the content that we have and getting it out on the web and making it digital friendly, and have developed a role here around this incredible transition that we're all going through around building information modeling and virtual design and construction, integrated project delivery, interoperability. So hopefully you're familiar with us from the brands that you know us, Architectural Record, ENR, Green Source, Suites, Dodge. But we also do an enormous amount of research. And part of what we're here to talk about today is a report that we put out back in December just about building information modeling. And you'll see the construction.com URL there. This is free. Go to that URL. You can see a lot of those reports that we have, but you can get this one downloaded for free, and I really encourage you to. So we'll go through some of the highlights of that today. Where this began actually was a predecessor report that we did in '07 looking at interoperability, because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about the challenges that we all face of interoperability and the lack of interoperability between software. But we wanted to do something to quantify it. And so for those of you who've seen that, we did calculate that approximately 3% of project costs really could be traced back to the lack of interoperability. But along the way, to do that study, we found ourselves interviewing people who were using the kinds of software that leads you to experience this lack of interoperability. And building information modeling was one of those. Because if you're operating in your own silo with your own tools, you never really exchange information with anybody else, interoperability isn't that big a deal. But once you begin to get into modeling and you begin to get into collaborative modeling and you begin to try and integrate your project delivery processes, that's when you become keenly aware of these issues around interoperability. And so as a result of doing that study of those folks who were using those kinds of tools and asking them when they started using them, what their experience had been, and will you continue using them, it led us to say that '08 was really the tipping point year for our industry. And that wasn't meant to mean that most projects were going to be modeled in '08, but what it means is that when we studied folks who began doing modeling and asked them, will you continue, and you get a 94% response rate of absolutely, that's what you look for tipping. So people moving beyond exploring it into really making it mainstream. So when that report came out, we were asked by a lot of people to do some deeper drilling in. The folks at the AIA who worked with us on this report, they began tracking their own BIM users, and they had an interesting statistic of between January of 2007, where only 20% of their member firms were actually using BIM on billable work. That rose to 31%, 55% increase over that one-year period. And the larger firms, those with over $5 million in billing, see almost two-thirds of those were actually doing billable work. So it indicated that the adoption was really taking off across that year. And the structural engineers also, as we know, have been modeling for quite a while. And this was in ENR back in April of '08. This survey is showing that really within 24 months, 90% of structural engineers said they'd be modeling their work. So it was pretty clear that the modeling was definitely taking off. So what we decided to do was get a group of sponsors together, and we were fortunate to get 23 separate companies and industry organizations to come together to help us sponsor this. Let's not look anymore at who's using it and who isn't. All right, let's just look at who's already in the pool, and let's see how fast they're going down towards the deep end there to get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. All right, let's just really study what BIM users are doing, and let this serve as a baseline. And so we tracked 5 major aspects in this study of BIM usage. First was adoption. All right, how did you get it into your firm, and what kind of an impact has it had? Sort of an inward-looking view. Secondly was what we think of as an outward-looking view. How are you implementing it? Once you've got it now, what are you doing with it? How are you working with other firms? Then third, once you've adopted it, now you're implementing it, how are you actually determining that it's providing value to you? Or are you doing it? Are you doing it qualitatively? Are you doing it quantitatively? Then fourth, now that you're up and running with this, how has it changed the way that you work, both your internal processes and those processes that you engage with other firms? And then lastly, the fifth topic was, what is your perspective on what we call BIM infrastructure, which are all the things you need outside of your firm to be able to actually make this work: the standards, the content, the software, the training, certification, outsourcing help, all that you need in order to make all this take off. So what we looked at the opportunity to do here was to create a baseline so we could take a snapshot, essentially where we are as an industry. About the middle of 2008 is where the data came from. And then we could compare this now in the future as we go through what I think we all believe over the next 5 to 10 years is probably going to be the biggest transformation, the biggest revolutionary transformation that this industry's ever gone through in the adoption of collaborative modeling. So how did we do this? We did it with phone interviews. They were 40 minutes long. The sponsors who came together early on to help us with this all vetted this survey so that it really reflected a lot of different perspectives. It was a 35-page questionnaire. We identified 302 BIM users, which our analysts indicated was the number from that pool that we needed in order to make this statistically significant. And here's how they broke out. We had 39 owners. We had 80 contractors, and we broke that down by CMs, GCs, and trade contractors. We had 101 engineers, and we broke that down by civil, MEP, and structural. And we had 82 architects. We also tried to get a reasonable breakdown across the sizes of companies. And for AEs, we did that really by their fee volume versus CMs, contractors, and owners. It was really the project volume. But we had buckets and tiers, and we tried to, as you can see, we ended up with a little bit more towards the large side, but we still got a reasonably good spread across company sizes. We asked, interestingly, for people to describe their own level of BIM sophistication. And, of course, there is no industry standard for that, so these are all self-described responses. But we did want to try again to make sure that we had enough of a reasonable mix that it wasn't all out of one category. And we did. We managed to get a pretty good breakdown between those who called themselves experts versus advanced versus intermediate versus beginner, with a few people really opting out saying, look, we really outsource all the BIM work itself. We're just getting the product back. We also wanted to make sure that we were getting a knowledgeable feedback. And so when we asked people how much of what percentage of your projects are going to be BIM next year, meaning 09, this was that breakdown. So 45% of the respondents to this survey that you're going to see the results of are folks who said that they'd be doing at least 60% of their work in BIM. And then it goes down from there to 18% saying that they were only going to be doing up to 15%. But we got a lot of good expertise, I think, here from people who really know what they're talking about. We also tried to get a breakdown across project types to make sure that we were representing as broad a slice of the industry as we possibly could. So, quick overview, some of the major findings before we get into each of these sections. 63% of the folks who are using BIM now were projecting they were going to use it on at least 30% of their projects in 09. 72% of them say that BIM has had an impact on their internal project processes. And of that expert slice, 82% of them believe it's had a very positive impact. So we found this to be incredibly encouraging and supportive of this tipping point analysis and a further acceleration of the rate of adoption. Because it's pretty clear as you go up that curve of expertise and reach that expert level, that has such a positive impact on your company's productivity. Interestingly, we found that contractors are the ones who expect to see the greatest percentage growth of BIM use this year, 09. And also interestingly, when we looked at the folks who are actually quantitatively measuring their ROI versus the ones who are just working off a gut feel, those who took the effort to actually measure it found it was higher than their gut feel even told them it was. We'll get into all that in a few minutes.